Well, what do you see that's missing? No hoodie. It's finally warmed up here in Phoenix. Probably be in the 80s today, which is great. Made good progress. Lower end's in. I reshimmed the cam, the breather gear. Made sure the tappets are aligned correctly. Obviously got the cases in. I did change out the oil lines. I went with braided black lines. They had this cheap, I don't even know. I mean, I've seen this used for fuel lines before, but not really oil lines. It's very hard, and it even starts cracking if you really push on it. So I got rid of that. In a primary, obviously, everything on that side's attached. Primary chain, clutches in. I'm going to get the primary cover on. Try to get the top end assembled today. And if all goes well, maybe I'll have this running probably sometime tomorrow. We'll run it on the dyno a little bit, put some miles on if everything's okay. We'll put the sidecar on, test it again, and be able to deliver this bad boy. Stay tuned. All right, we're making good progress. I just want to show you, I've re-ball honed the cylinder. The other one doesn't look too good, so we're going to re-ball hone both, obviously, but nice 30-degree crosshatch. We do that all in-house, just moving some material around. You're not removing any. I'll show you what the stock one looked like. Here's the stock one. You can see it just doesn't look, holding the light up there, so I'm hoping you can see it well. Just no crosshatch marks, and this bike really has no miles on it, so I guess they just threw it together without doing it. Anyway, we're taking care of it. We're making good progress, and we'll keep moving. And another tech tip when you're doing the heads on an Evo, twin cam, even an M8, lubrication of the head bolts. You can use a little bit of light oil in here and a little on the surface where the bolt attaches and goes down and seals with the head. If you don't use that, you can get what's friction. It's called friction torque, and you get an inaccurate torque. Don't use anti-seize. The guy that initially put this together used anti-seize. Anti-seize will clump up under here, and you'll get an inaccurate torque. Actually, once that engine expands and contracts a few times, the anti-seize pushes out, you'll lose your torque on the head gasket, so don't do that. Also, you can use the head bolts on an Evo or a twin cam multiple times, and I've never had an issue. With the M8s, those are a one-time use, and I highly recommend, if you're building any kind of engine with power, upgrade to either the Screaming Eagles or I personally like the S&Ss. Those are a one-time use, but these ones you can use multiple times. Again, a little oil. I like the ARP fastener material. It's basically kind of like a Molly lube, which is fine. Just a little bit, don't overdo it. I see guys that use too much oil in here and it'll drip down, and before they torque the head, it gets under the cylinder in between the engine and the base gasket, and a lot of times that'll cause a leak. So I don't tend to use oil. I'll use a little ARP fastener, maybe even just a little bit of Molly lube. Okay, that's it. And just a couple more tips on this Evo. You'll notice on the later rocker boxes, on the lower rocker box, I don't know if you can see this, but you'll see there's a line, the casting that comes all the way across, and you see this indentation here. near the rocker arm shaft. Well, on the early ones, they didn't have this. So what would happen is over time, the gasket would actually push out and they would all start to leak. It always pays to upgrade to the newer one where you have this casting that comes all the way across, so that gasket won't push in because it's made of rubber and it won't start to leak. One other thing you can do, you could take a product called Hylamar, which was developed by Rolls-Royce, or for Rolls-Royce, and you put a little dab of that in here, and when you put the gasket in, it will stop it from pushing in to this area if it doesn't have the cast. So I always like to update to the later rockers. These are the later ones, which is great. And one other thing we want to look at, this is the middle rocker box. Some people call them D-rings. I've never really called them that, it's just the middle rocker box. But anyway, if you remember on our original one, they had 2 umbrella valves. It only takes one. It's on the intake side is the push rod tube. On the intake push rod tube side, as the air comes up the push rod tube, as the pistons go down, it comes up through the push rod tube, comes up through a hole here, and then pushes this little umbrella valve up. And the umbrella valve helps separate the oil and the air, and then the rest of the air passes its way through this hole here, out the breather, and into the air cleaner. What you can do to help with that, one, the green umbrellas are the the updated umbrella valves also. The earlier ones were black. They did have brown ones for a time too, but the green are the updated. This little passage here is the oil drain. You can open this up slightly and it'll help the oil drain quicker. Less, it'll help with the oil carryover. There was also a company that used to make this thing that used to look just like a, I want to say like an ice cream cone. Then it would raise this area here so the oil couldn't kind of build up height and then drop down the hole, because we had so many problems with oil carryover into the air cleaner, especially at high speeds. The higher the engine's revving, the more oil carryover issues we had. It was a good product. I don't think it's available anymore. I haven't seen it for a long time, but we used to sell a lot of them. Anyway, just open this hole up a little bit. It'll help the oil drain, and that's it. We're going to start putting this together. We're ready to do a first start. This is a real first start, not like a lot of the YouTube videos you see where they've already been run. I don't know if it's going to start right up or not. I have primed it. I know I have oil pressure. So we've rebuilt the engine. We've redone the rear end. We did a 50 amp charging system. We've pretty much gone through the whole bike. As you know, if you've been watching the previous videos on Bill on Bikes, it's been an absolute mess, especially for someone that paid basically $80,000 for a vehicle, and he's probably spending another probably 20 with me by the time we're done. Anyway, last thing I am going to have to do is remove the front wheel. They have some funky washers going on up there. I'm going to have to take that apart. I assume if they did the rear wrong, there's something probably going wrong in the front. As you know, they didn't put the spacer in on the crank bearing, so they were just forcing the bearings together when I put the 50 amp stator in and torqued the crank bolt to 165 foot-pounds, which is spec. It was just crushing the bearings because there was nothing to preload the bearing on. Let's see what happens here. As far as oil pressure goes, the needle pegs, they must have the wire on the back of the gauge incorrect, I'm sure, because they had the wires wrong here. So now I do have an oil pressure light, is where before I didn't. I know the light goes out when I primed it. I saw it go out, so we're good there. So let's give it a start. We'll see what happens. Hopefully it starts up here. It's a Pengle, so it's not a vacuum fed. It's charging. Sounds good. I have a very specific 3 or 4 cycles that I go through when it's a new engine. These Evolutions engines expand about 20%. A lot of that clamp load, that 20% expansion, is your clamp load on the head gasket and the base gasket. So I will let these heat cycle. First time, 30 seconds, shut it off. The next time I'll run it for a minute, shut it off, let it completely cool. And then I'll do a minute and a half. And then on the 4th one, I'll do 3 minutes, each time letting the engine completely cool. And then once we're done with that, we're gonna put it on the dyno. I'm gonna put some miles on it. And if we have no leaks, no drips, no errors, which I hope, and I'll kind of go around and just touch a wrench to the critical fast, make sure everything's good, we'll mount the sidecar. Because once the sidecar is mounted, they're a pain to work on anything on the right side. I think we're looking pretty good, and I think I'm gonna have a really happy customer, Rod. So when you watch this, you'll be happy. I'm also gonna do a quick video on Facebook for you. So I'm gonna do that next. And we'll go from there. I also have to time it. So right now it's only statically timed. I got it pretty close. I'll dynamically time it. After I run the heat cycles through it, before I put it on the dyno, it will be dynamically timed. All right, well, the compressor just started, so you can hear that noise. We finally have the sidecar mounted on our 94 project. So happy, it's been so much work. Still have to hook up the front stabilizer, bolts are just in place. Everything's looking pretty good. We did have to do a lot of work to the front wheel. They didn't have the proper length brake bolts at the top. They were only in by a couple threads, which is very dangerous. You couldn't even torque them to spec. The axle wasn't correct. We had to do a spacer on this side, and because they had done it wrong, the front speedo drive had actually broken and gone inside the hub. So what we had to do was machine that and put a different sleeve in the wheel to make that secure and safe. So that's all squared away. I put some test miles on this morning. Everything's good. We don't have any leaks, no drips, no errors. Very happy. So we'll get the sidecar mounted up. I'll make sure we get the toe in and everything correct on the sidecar. Put some test miles on it, and hopefully we can deliver it to our customer and he can enjoy Bike Week out here in Arizona, which he's flying in on Friday. Today is Monday. So we're gonna get this all squared away and take you for a little test ride when we're done. All right, it's finally done. Our 1994 Harley-Davidson Resto engine rebuild project is finally done, and I'm super happy. 86 total hours in this. You know, we've gone through pretty much everything but the transmission. Hopefully they assembled that correctly. Another outfit had assembled this motorcycle. It just was a terrible job. We get it. Went through everything pretty much, and now my customer's gonna have a nice riding bike. All right, so let's get up close and personal. Let's take a good look at this bike. Front wheel. Got the brakes all squared away. They didn't have the correct brake bolt up here on the top. It was barely in by, I'd say, 3 threads. You couldn't torque it properly. Front spacer where it goes inside the wheel that's actually attached to the speedo drive had broken. We had to machine this differently to fit. Put different spaces in the wheel to get the alignment correct. They had the inner brake pad retainer in 180 degrees, so it was out 180 degrees. It was in backwards. Obviously, they didn't shim the engine correctly. They didn't put the shim in at all for the crank, so the engine locked up. So completely rebuilt the engine. Had to put new rear belt, new front sprocket. They had a 42 tooth instead of a 40 in the front, and the stock size belt, which got a little bit torn up because they had the wheel cocked in the rear fork, and you could see where there's still some scuff marks down here where the belt was actually hitting the tire, but we got that all squared away. Most of the critical fasteners on this bike were either loose, under torqued, or did not have Loctite. And then in places where they had nylock nuts, the bolts weren't actually engaged in the nylock, so they weren't doing anything. I will say the paint job on this bike is phenomenal. They did a great job on the paint. I know I'm a little bit on the dark side here. We'll get to the lighter side where the sun's hitting it today. And the paint job is absolutely phenomenal. And the leather work is nice. The stereo is pretty cool. It's a kicker system, obviously. Nice chrome. But the assembly was just a disaster. It was really these guys that did this, and I'm not going to mention their name, but I wouldn't let them put my kids' playground set together. I mean, I'd be worried it would fall apart and they'd get killed. So anyway, we got it all squared away. I'm going to get it started up. We're going to take it for a little test ride. And hopefully tomorrow I'm going to bring my helmet with the camera mounted to it, and I could take you along for a ride with me. But let's get this thing started up. Rod, let's check it out. Come on, buddy. Look at this machine. It came out good, huh?
Yeah. I'm excited. Think she get done for bike
Just hop
week?
in the sidecar because I got to make sure I get the balance right.
Really?
I'm dead serious. Get in there. Get in there. We got to go. Yeah, you're all set for bike week. We can go for hop in. It's backed up here. Trying not to hit your trailer. And that's it, man.
That's it. That's awesome.
It's fun, huh?
Oh yeah.
And that's it.
Right on.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you check us out on YouTube, Facebook, Bill on Bikes, motorcyclegarage.net, and hit that like button. Thanks a lot.